The hum of the office was quiet, almost peaceful, but I could hear the faint buzz of my phone on the glass desk. My silk blouse felt smooth against my skin, a little too fancy for this early morning, but I liked it that way. It made me feel untouchable. Untouchable until I saw the email subject line flash across the screen. Meeting request, urgent, from none other than Jacob Reynolds. My former boss. The same man who once laughed at my degree, the same man who whispered, "A diploma like that? You'll never make it here." I smirked, a soft, ironic twist of my lips. How long had it been? 3 years since I walked out of that office, head high, despite the knot in my throat. 3 years of late nights, small wins, and silent victories no one knew about, especially him. I ran my fingers across the leather edge of my desk, inhaled the sharp scent of coffee, and let my thoughts wander. Today, he wanted something from me. Or maybe he didn't know he did yet. He had no idea who I'd become. I checked my reflection in the window. The city's skyline shimmered behind me, like a promise. A promise that I could stand here, poised, in control, while he would finally see the truth. And soon, very soon, I would decide exactly how that truth would hit him. I still remember that office like it was yesterday. The harsh fluorescent lights, the faint smell of stale coffee, the way my resume seemed to tremble in my hands. I was 24, fresh out of college, clutching my degree in international business like it was a shield. My first week at Reynolds and Company was supposed to be exciting. Instead, it was humiliating. Jacob Reynolds leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, a smirk playing across his face. "You really think that degree qualifies you for this role?" he asked, voice dripping with condescension. I could feel the heat rise in my cheeks. My hands shook slightly, gripping the edge of the table. My voice faltered before I even opened my mouth. I wanted to scream, to defend myself, to say that my grades, my internships, my determination, it all meant something. But nothing came out. Just the silent sting of being dismissed, as if my ambitions were invisible. After the meeting, I sat alone in the lobby, hugging my laptop to my chest. The lobby was empty except for an elderly woman in the corner, knitting. She looked up and smiled at me. She was my grandmother's friend, visiting a client. She didn't know me, yet she said softly, "Don't let anyone else define your worth, dear. Your value isn't in their approval, but in your persistence." She handed me a small leather-bound notebook, saying, "Write your plans. Track your wins. One day, you'll see. This will be your proof." I clutched that notebook like a lifeline. That evening, I sat on my tiny apartment balcony, city lights flickering below, and made a choice. I would leave this place if I had to. I would learn, grow, and succeed on my own terms. No more waiting for approval. No more enduring sarcasm veiled as advice. I was done shrinking. That night, under the dim balcony lamp, I scribbled the first line in that notebook. I will never be underestimated again. It was more than a promise. It was a vow to myself that the world would one day see my worth, whether Jacob Reynolds approved or not. After that night on my balcony, everything changed. I threw myself into learning, experimenting, and building my career in ways Jacob Reynolds had scoffed at. I started small, freelance projects, consulting for startups, anything that allowed me to sharpen my skills. Nights blurred into mornings, fueled by cold coffee and stubborn determination. It was during one of those long nights at a co-working space that I met Daniel Harper. He was a seasoned financial strategist who had a reputation for spotting raw talent. He didn't dismiss my degree, my youth, or my lack of corporate polish. Instead, he asked questions that challenged me, pushed me to think bigger. "You have the drive, Isabella," he said one evening, leaning back in his chair. "Most people quit before they even start. You're just getting started." That phrase became my mantra. There were setbacks, of course. Clients who canceled at the last minute, nights I cried over spreadsheets I couldn't perfect, moments of self-doubt when Jacob's mocking words echoed in my head. But with each challenge, I learned resilience. I learned that being underestimated was an advantage. No one was watching, so I could build quietly, without interference. Slowly, my wins began to accumulate. Landing my first major client felt like a secret victory dance in my living room. My first profitable deal brought tears I didn't expect. Each success was carefully documented in that leather notebook my grandmother's friend had given me, a tangible reminder of how far I'd come. I kept my achievements mostly secret. Family and acquaintances saw a modest version of me. Casual social media updates, polite emails that revealed nothing. Jacob Reynolds? He hadn't heard a whisper. And I liked it that way. There was power in invisibility, in being underestimated while quietly mastering the game. Within 3 years, I had carved a niche as a strategic consultant in corporate finance, advising companies on budget allocations, risk analysis, and financial forecasting. By the time Jacob's firm came across my consultancy profile, I was already handling portfolios worth millions. And not just handling them, I was thriving. My influence was real, and my expertise undeniable. All the while, I kept a small ritual. Every week, I opened that notebook, flipped through my early scribbles, and smiled. The vows I made under the dim balcony light were no longer promises. They were reality. I was not the girl who trembled in Jacob Reynolds' office. I was Isabella Turner, decisive, strategic, unstoppable. And the best part? He still didn't know it. The knock on my office door was deliberate, almost hesitant. I looked up from my laptop and saw him, Jacob Reynolds, standing there in his tailored suit, confidence radiating in the same way it had 3 years ago. Only this time, I was different. I wasn't the nervous, underestimated graduate he had mocked. I was the woman who now controlled multi-million-dollar budgets, and soon he would know it. Isabella? You have a moment? He asked, his voice cautious, almost polite, a stark contrast to the condescending tone I remembered. Of course, Jacob. Please come in, I said, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. My office reflected my journey, sleek modern furniture, abstract art I had personally chosen, bookshelves lined with awards and client dossiers. Everything spoke of meticulous planning, careful growth, and quiet power. He glanced around, his eyes lingering on a framed certificate of my consultancy's top performance award. I let him take it all in, watching the subtle shifts in his expression, curiosity, disbelief, a flicker of guilt. So, you've been doing well, he said finally, though the words sounded awkward in his mouth. I smiled faintly, leaning back in my chair. Well enough that I'm now reviewing the budgets for Reynolds and Company. His face froze. Wait, what? I said, your company's budgets, the ones you're responsible for, are now under my oversight. I've been appointed as the lead consultant for corporate finance, which includes allocations, forecasting, and approvals. Your department falls directly under my purview. Silence. The kind of silence that carries the weight of realization. He swallowed, a slight tremor in his jaw. I didn't know. I had no idea you. I imagine not, I interrupted gently, letting the irony linger. 3 years ago, you mocked my degree, told me I wouldn't last a week in corporate finance. Now, those same budgets you once thought I was unqualified to understand are directly under my control. He looked around again, this time more closely. The client contracts, performance charts, and financial reports were not just decoration. They were proof. Proof that I had built a career from the ground up, quietly, without fanfare. You've grown, he admitted finally, voice barely above a whisper, tinged with awe and shame. I misjudged you. I nodded slowly. And now, Jacob, you have a choice. You can either work within the new framework, respecting the processes I've implemented, or you can watch from the sidelines as your department adjusts without your input. His eyes widened. I let the weight of my words settle. This wasn't about revenge. It was about power, earned and deserved. Every decision, every late night, every small victory had led to this moment, and I was fully aware of it. Jacob swallowed again, meeting my gaze, no longer the predator, but the one who had underestimated the prey and lost. I leaned back in my chair, letting Jacob take in the office one last time. This was more than a confrontation. It was a turning point. I held the upper hand now, and with it came responsibility, Responsibility not just for budgets, but for shaping how those around me would engage with me and with each other going forward. Jacob, I began, my voice calm but unwavering. Here's how this is going to work. First, you will respect the financial framework I've put in place. No more bypassing procedures. No more assumptions that your opinion outweighs established strategy. He nodded slowly, swallowing hard, and I continued. Second, you will communicate transparently with your team. Any lingering arrogance, belittling, or dismissiveness, it ends now. I expect accountability, not excuses. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was giving him rules to follow, rules he would have scoffed at when I was 24. But this wasn't punishment. It was the price of learning. I believed in growth, even if it came late. And finally, I said, leaning forward slightly, you will take personal responsibility for your professional development. Attend the training sessions we've scheduled. Embrace mentorship. Recognize that expertise is earned, not assumed. This isn't about humiliation. It's about change for you and your team. Jacob looked stunned, but there was a flicker of understanding behind his eyes. Perhaps for the first time, he realized that authority wasn't about belittling others. It was about skill, vision, and accountability. All things I had mastered quietly while he remained blinded by his ego. I paused, letting the weight of my presence fill the room. Compassion mixed with firmness. I cared enough to guide him, but I would not bend to old patterns of disrespect. My authority was absolute, but fair. Understand this, I added softly. Every decision I make going forward is about the company's growth, the integrity of the process, and the respect everyone deserves. You will comply, not because I demand it, but because this is the only way forward for all of us. Jacob nodded, finally, with a quiet humility. The tension in the room eased, replaced by a cautious respect. He wasn't my adversary anymore, at least not in the old sense. He was someone who had been given a second chance to learn, to grow, and to respect what he had once mocked. And I, Isabella Turner, was the one holding the blueprint for change. I had shifted the balance of power entirely, but the victory wasn't just in control. It was in the opportunity to transform what once had been toxic into something constructive. Weeks passed, and I watched the changes unfold. Jacob adjusted, slowly, deliberately, learning to follow the processes I'd set and to treat his team with respect. Meetings that had once been tense became collaborative. He began asking questions instead of asserting dominance, taking notes instead of belittling. I could see it in the subtle ways he interacted now, the acknowledgement in his tone, the humility in his posture. I walked through the office one morning, observing the quiet efficiency, the hum of productive work. My team was thriving, my influence fully recognized, yet no one needed to know the full story behind my rise. And that felt good. The satisfaction of success measured in tangible results, not applause. I returned to my office, picking up the leather-bound notebook that had been my talisman since that balcony night years ago. I flipped through pages filled with scribbles, goals, and tiny victories, the milestones that had seemed insignificant at the time, but had paved the way to this very moment. The words of my grandmother's friend echoed in my mind. Your value isn't in their approval, but in your persistence. I smiled. Persistence had carried me here, through doubt, fear, and humiliation. I had transformed pain into purpose, mockery into motivation. I had grown into the woman I always knew I could be. Looking out the window at the city skyline, sunlight catching the glass towers, I felt a quiet pride. I had learned to protect my worth, to demand respect, and to lead with both authority and empathy. The journey had been lonely at times, yes, but it had also been necessary. I placed the notebook back on my desk and adjusted my blazer, the fabric cool against my wrist. Today, I wasn't just controlling budgets, I was shaping futures, including my own. And as I sat there, I whispered to myself, the words rolling off my tongue like a final, cinematic note. I am the author of my success. And no one's mockery can ever write my story for me. The office hummed around me, indifferent yet alive. And for the first time in a long time, I felt complete, not because anyone had recognized me, but because I had recognized myself.